Hey friends, tonight we step into a warm, flickering past, where the streets of medieval Morocco come alive after sundown. You're wandering a 13th century market, probably somewhere in Fez or Marrakech. The stone beneath your sandals is still radiating heat from the day, and lanterns swing gently overhead, dripping shadows across striped awnings and basket-lined stalls. Charcoal smoke curls into your nose. It's not unpleasant, more like a whisper of cumin and seared lamb fat drifting over cracked clay rooftops. There's a hum here, not just of people, but of oil bubbling, metal clanging, someone calling out the day's prices like they're hosting a game show in Arabic. You barely dodge a donkey with a basket full of carrots that seem more dignified than the donkey itself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing the sleepy map of our tiny global campfire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck beneath a wooden beam, the kind strung up to hang cured meats in the day and lanterns at night. Around you, hawkers sell hot food that has no translation, only steam and smell. There's mechoui lamb, roasted whole underground until the bones fall out, then hacked into hunks and sold with just a sprinkle of salt and a squeeze of lemon. No plate, just a thick sheet of paper. If you're lucky, your fingers shine with fat within minutes, and you're only halfway through the first stall. You glance around. A child is balancing a tray of sticky date rolls on his head, dodging grown-ups with Olympic grace. An old man haggles furiously over 2 boiled eggs. Someone knocks over a jar of preserved lemons, and they roll down the alley like tiny yellow ghosts. This isn't some staged medieval fantasy. This is food you eat standing up, surrounded by goats and incense, and the off-key twang of a 2-stringed rebab played by a man with no shirt and endless charisma. Historians still argue whether these night markets were spontaneous or managed by strict guild systems. Some say the street economy was carefully overseen by Mutasib's market inspectors, who regulated everything from food quality to whether the guy next to you is overcharging for figs. Others argue the evening stalls were more informal, popping up like mushrooms after sunset, barely noticed by the bureaucracy unless someone complained. One thing we do know, these food stalls weren't just about eating. They were gathering places messy, public, chaotic, a place to listen, gossip, recite poetry if you were bold or drunk. Think of them as the medieval Twitter feed, chaotic, spicy, and full of opinions you didn't ask for. A vendor calls you over with a smile that somehow combines hospitality with pure chaos. He's got a tiny metal grill and skewers of something sizzling, not quite chicken, not quite identifiable. You make a decision based solely on smell, which honestly isn't the worst policy here. He hands you the skewer, using a shard of old bread, already soaked with juice. You take a bite, and the flavors knock you sideways. Char, histamine, paprika, possibly cinnamon. There's a whisper of something sweet underneath, maybe dried apricot or ground raisins. The heat is more tingle than fire, enough to remind you that this isn't medieval England, and they don't mess around with bland food here. A little girl with coal-lined eyes hands you a cup of water with mint leaves floating on top. It tastes like a glacier flirted with a garden. She says nothing, just holds out a hand, and you drop a few copper coins into her palm, pretending you know what they're worth. The stars above are absurdly clear, and the longer you wander, the more the smells blur together. Wood smoke, turmeric, the metallic edge of fresh blood from a butcher shop still closing up. You pass a man roasting eggplants on an open flame. then mashing them with garlic and oil into a paste. You're told is zeoloke. You're offered a taste and pretend you're not already full, because frankly, you'll regret it more if you say no. Overhead, a bell rings, possibly signaling curfew, or maybe just the man with the soup cart announcing his arrival. Either way, the market responds like it's a well-rehearsed orchestra. You follow the flow, pulled forward by the river of people and the sound of simmering. Later, you'll realize you walked for 2 hours, out at 6 stalls, and somehow didn't try a single dish twice. Sleepiness creeps in gently, like the soft shuffle of slippers on stone. But your belly's warm, your mind's busy cataloging spices, and the night is still stretching outward like dough on a baker's palm. You find yourself drawn toward the scent of something both familiar and impossible to name: smoky, yeasty, slightly sour. It pulls you through the crowd like a string tied to your nose. You round a corner, and there it is, a small bakery no wider than a bedroom, built right into the side of a clay wall. Its ceiling is low enough to make you duck. Inside, the heat is immediate, comforting, and intense. The baker is barefoot, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. He barely looks up as he pulls flat rounds of dough from a wooden paddle and slaps them expertly onto the blistering sides of a clay oven built into the ground. This is khubz, the Moroccan flatbread that isn't exactly flat, and certainly isn't shy. You watch as he slides out a loaf, just slightly puffed, golden brown and freckled from the fire. He cuts one open, steam escapes with a hiss like it's gossiping, and drops a bit of olive oil and cumin inside before handing it to you with a nod. No words, just bread, like some divine handshake. The crust crackles as you tear a piece, and the inside is tender with a faint tang, thanks to a slow fermentation process that no one times with clocks, just instincts and sky. You mop up the leftover juice from the mystery skewer earlier. It's somehow better now, the bread rounding out flavors like punctuation in an edible sentence. Bread wasn't just food here, it was currency. Not metaphorically, literally. People paid in loaves, bartered with them, judged families by how their bread rose or didn't. And because most homes didn't have their own ovens, it was common to see children carrying raw dough on wooden boards to the neighborhood baker, marked with special family stamps to prevent mix-ups. Think sourdough, but with a medieval postal system. Historians still argue whether khubz was baked primarily in communal spaces, or whether traveling bakers made rounds like bread messengers. The answer is probably both, depending on whether you lived in the maze of a city or the quiet stretch of a village. Either way, the smell was non-negotiable. You couldn't live a day in Morocco without breathing in baked wheat and scorched clay. Next to the baker, an older woman in layers of saffron-colored linen sells boiled eggs by the half-dozens. She cracks one and dips it in salt, mixed with ground cumin, then offers it to you like it's a rite of passage. You accept. Obviously, the yolk is rich and crumbly. The spice lingers like a whispered proverb. Further down, you pass a stack of imsamin, those square, folded Moroccan pancakes that flake apart like edible origami. One vendor slathers his with honey and butter. Another rolls his around fried onions and coriander. You try both. Just to be fair, each bite is warm and greasy in the best possible way. You feel like you're eating something that doubles as both breakfast and negotiation tactics. A little boy beside you is dunking his bread into a bowl of lentils so thick it could stop a conversation. He tells you quite proudly that his mother makes it with a secret spice. When pressed, he shrugs and says, whatever she feels like that day. You nod. That tracks. At this point, your fingers are sticky, your sleeves are suspiciously oily, and you've developed an emotional attachment to cumin. It's in everything, but never the same way twice. The spice here doesn't overwhelm, it collaborates. Even the salt tastes more thoughtful, like it knows when to speak up and when to back off. And just when you think your carb limit has been exceeded, someone walks by carrying a basket of harcha semolina pan bread, crusty on the outside and warm in the center, like the edible cousin of a hot stone massage. You don't even fight it. You buy one and eat it with a square of goat cheese that tastes like it's been aged inside a philosophical argument. There's something deeply soothing about this, about a society where bread wasn't a side dish, but the canvas. Everything else, all the lambs and lentils and olives, just borrowed space. Bread was the point, the meal, the ritual. You lean against a wall that's still holding onto the day's warmth and bite into your final piece of cobs like it's a slow exhale. Someone plays a reed flute in the distance badly. A cat licks oil from the stone. A stranger smiles at you with teeth like chipped pottery and offers you a sip of something sweet in a copper cup. You don't ask what it is. You're not just eating food. You're learning an accent, one bite at a time. The farther you stroll into the labyrinth of alleyways, the more you realize this city hums on broth, not wine, not ale broth. Bubbling, fragrant, seasoned water with ingredients that make you raise an eyebrow and then raise your spoon. You're pulled toward the unmistakable smell of escargot. Yes, snails, but don't get squeamish. This isn't a dainty French delicacy served on white porcelain. This is street food, earthy, brainy, defiant. The vendor stirs his cauldron with a stick thicker than your wrist. It's more soup wizardry than culinary technique. He scoops out a ladle of broth into a shallow ceramic bowl and drops in a handful of snails, still wearing their twisty little shells like proud hats. The bowl lands in your hands with a thud, and suddenly you're part of a tradition that dates back over 1,000 years. You're handed a toothpick made from olive wood. Time to extract your snack. The snail meat is chewy, but not rubbery, flavored with anise, thyme, and something floral that might be lavender or might be a culinary accident that no one wants to correct. The broth itself is the real showstopper, earthy and herby. It tastes like the steam of a garden after rain. Some Moroccans swear by its health benefits, saying it clears the liver or warms the soul. Honestly, you're just impressed by the vendor's ability to pour tea with one hand while counting coins and yelling at a passing donkey with the other. And then it happens. A snail escapes your bowl. It launches itself with unexpected grace onto the stone street, rolls, and comes to rest beside your foot like a tiny declaration of independence. The vendor doesn't blink. He knows you're new, he says dryly, before handing you another. Around you, people sit on overturned crates and low stools, slurping and debating, not about the food that's a given, but about poetry. One man quotes a line from Al-Mutanabi, and another counters with something from Ibn Hazm. You don't understand all the words, but the rhythm of the argument is almost musical. Historians still argue whether these open-air soup debates were formal gatherings or just what happened naturally when people with opinions met steam and seating. Some think they were precursors to the literary salons of later centuries. Others think people were just bored and soup was hot. You wipe your hands on a paper square that dissolves faster than your last relationship. A teenager passes by with a tray of fresh herbs mint, basil, rosemary likely headed to a tea cellar. The scent hits you like a soft slap and resets your senses. You follow him instinctively, like a well-fed bloodhound. But before you can catch up, you're intercepted by another vendor who offers you a thin, flat round of barley bread with roasted garlic mashed into the center. It's crisp at the edges, chewy at the heart. You take a bite, and suddenly you're back in the realm of the predictable only to discover that he's snuck in crushed black olives and preserved lemon, and the whole thing tastes like a late-night love letter written in salt. The street narrows here. Two cats hiss at each other over a fish spine, and you edge past them like a diplomat. A child holding a jar of pickled carrots winks at you. You're not sure if it's friendly or a challenge. This is the kind of place where history doesn't feel ancient. It feels chewed, digested, still hot from the pot. Food doesn't arrive on plates. It arrives with context. Why this herb? Why that vessel? Why does this soup taste slightly metallic while that one smells like your grandmother's attic? Because every ingredient has a backstory. Every vendor, a philosophy. You're not just eating, you're studying, performing, participating. Someone offers you a warm cup of broth on the house. You accept. It's different from the snail one-liter, with cumin and possibly fenugreek. It coats your throat in a way that makes you feel like you've swallowed a bedtime story. A woman nearby pours water over her hands from a brass jug, then wraps her bread in cloth and tucks it under her arm like a sleeping baby. Her gaze meets yours, and she gives you a tiny nod. You're not sure if she approves or just recognizes that look, the look of someone who's discovering that food can be language. And just like that, the snails are gone. So is the sun. The lanterns burn brighter, casting gold shadows on mud brick walls. And you feel both full and somehow hungrier for more stories, more strange broths, more unexpected textures that make you blink and say, "Wait, what is that?" You lean back against a wooden beam, sip the last of your broth, and realize you've just eaten something that used to crawl and now feels like comfort. That's the magic here. Nothing is what you expect, but everything makes sleepy sense in the end. You follow the swirl of herbs and laughter toward a quieter corner of the market, where something almost musical hisses through the air. Not music exactly, but rhythm metal tapping, boiling, and the clink of glass. You're nearing the tea stalls, and in Morocco, tea isn't just a beverage, it's theater. You see a man with a long, curved brass kettle holding court like a magician. He lifts it high, a dramatic arc above shoulder level, and pours a thin stream into a small, handleless glass from what seems like an impossible distance. Not a drop spills. The crowd nearby nods in appreciation, not just of the tea, but of the performance. He tops off another cup, then pours that back into the kettle and repeats the motion several times, aerating the liquid until it's frothy and glinting in the firelight. This is Ate green tea with spearmint, usually sweetened to a level that might make your dentist weep. You're handed a cup. It's hot, the kind of hot that warns you to wait. But of course, you don't. You take a sip and flinch because it's boiling, but also you smile because it tastes like green leaves whispering secrets into your bloodstreams. Historians still argue whether Moroccan tea culture originated directly from British trade ships or if it was funneled through Spanish and Ottoman channels first. What's agreed upon is that by the 19th century, it was a ritual so embedded in daily life that refusing tea could be considered a minor diplomatic incident. The mint used isn't just any mint. It's Nana, a wild variety, sharper and more aromatic than your supermarket sprigs. In winter, some sellers will mix in wormwood for bitterness, claiming it wakes up the liver. In spring, lemon verbena makes an appearance. Summer, orange blossom petals might sneak in. A boy refills your glass without asking. He gives you a conspiratorial grin as if to say, "You weren't done." You weren't finished resting. Nearby, two old men are embroiled in an argument over the best type of sugar cone. Not just how sweet, but how coarse. One slaps the table and insists the coarser, the better it dissolves slower, so the tea has time to think. You pretend to nod like that makes sense, which, oddly, it does. You watch as sugar is chipped off with a metal pick and dropped into the pot like precious minerals. It dissolves with a sigh. The color darkens slightly, and somehow the whole atmosphere slows down. Your shoulders follow suit. Someone passes by with a tray of Cobb El Ghazal crescent-shaped almond pastries named after gazelle ankles. The smell alone is intoxicating orange blossom water. Cinnamon, ground nuts. You grab one without thinking. The shell is delicate, the filling sandy and rich. It pairs absurdly well with your tea, like the two were invented in the same sigh. It hits you. Then, this isn't just food and drink. It's a full-blown strategy. The tea stalls aren't near the meat grills or the fish fryers. They're strategically placed near the edges of the market, in quieter corners where the noise recedes and conversations stretch. You're not here just to eat or drink. You're here to recover, to reflect, to watch people think slowly. A musician strums a gwembri nearby, and the sound is so low and warm, it might just be your bones humming. You close your eyes for a second, and your mind wanders to the idea of a medieval tea date, maybe a merchant convincing a spice dealer to drop a few dirhams off a shipment, or maybe a poet charming a baker's daughter with verses about how her eyes remind him of well-steeped leaves. You open your eyes and realize the tea vendor is refilling your glass again. You didn't even notice he took it. That's how smooth they are. He winks at you. Good, he asks. You nod, but what you want to say is, this might be the best cup I've had in 3 lifetimes. A small plate of candied nuts arrives. You didn't order them. No one did. They just appear, as if summoned by your relaxation. They crunch and dissolve at the same time. You don't even bother asking what they're coated with sugar. Sure, but also something floral, rose water, or maybe just contentment. In this corner, the world softens. Even the voices of merchants fade into murmurs. The steam from the tea rises in slow ribbons, catching the lamplight, curling around your temples. You sit longer than you mean to, because you realize the tea is doing what tea should do, pulling your heart rate down, inch by inch, until it matches the tempo of the streets, or maybe the stars. You take one last sip. Your cup is still half full, but you're more than satisfied. You rise from the tea stall with just enough sugar in your blood to feel like a dignified ambassador of snacks. The market is different now, quieter, sleepier, like the walls have exhaled, but the smells keep coming, like chapters in a never-ending food memoir. Just past a narrow doorway framed by palm fronds, you catch a waft of something unmistakably rich. You follow it, as one must, into a tiny stall cluttered with earthen jars, oily trays, and things that don't announce themselves until they hit your tongue. A boy hands you something wrapped in dried fig leaf. Inside, a sticky, reddish-brown paste you're told is harissa, but it's not that harissa the modern, store-bought kind you might spread on a sandwich. No, this is the kind made by someone's grandmother who never once measured a single spice in her life. It's thick with roasted chili, garlic, oil, and maybe caraway. Historians still argue about the true contents of early harissa blends. Some swear by coriander seed, others claim cinnamon, and one 14th century recipe casually mentions crushed rose petals, which frankly feels like overachieving. You smear a bit of it on a triangle of barley bread and take a tentative bite. Your mouth sings not from heat, but from confusion. It's spicy, yes, but also smoky, slightly sweet, with a citrusy backhand you never saw coming. You reach for your teacup before remembering you left it behind. Tragic. Next to the harissa vendor is a man slicing blocks of white cheese. It's hard and crumbly, not unlike feta, but funkier. This is Jablé goat cheese, often stored in clay pots and left to age until it has the personality of a disgruntled scholar. You try a sliver. It's sour, creamy, and not entirely polite. The cheese is served with dried dates, so sticky they cling to your fingers like regret. They balance the cheese like a melody needs a bass line. This combo sweet, salty, tangy is one Morocco figured out centuries before it became a thing in modern tapas bars. A small group of women pass you with baskets balanced on their heads, filled with walnut-stuffed figs and candied orange peel. They walk like dancers, backs straight, eyes forward, not even a flicker of effort. You're too full to ask for one, but you admire the way they move through space, like poetry with groceries. As you lean against a clay wall, still warm from the day's sun, another boy shuffles by with a tray of makrout diamond-shaped semolina pastries stuffed with date paste and fried, then dipped in honey. You don't plan to eat one, you just want to look. But somehow it ends up in your hand, and well, you're only human. The outer crust shatters like sugar glass, and the inside is soft and nutty. It's the kind of dessert that hums rather than sings. You take another bite and realize it's not just a treat, it's ballast, something to carry the weight of the night on. In the stall across from you, someone is selling olives, but not like in jars. These are piled high in barrels green, black, red, and marinated in everything from garlic to lemon to preserved herbs so strong you can smell them from across the alley. One variety is spiked with pickled carrots and coriander seed. Another tastes like it was aged inside a spice merchant's dream journal. You sample a few, the seller grins and keeps handing you more before you can decline. At this rate, you'll need a bed and a clay pot to roll into. The ground beneath your sandals feels dustier now, like the wind has started sweeping memories into the corners. You wander past a candlelit corner where two men are pressing something between stones. You get closer. It's argan paste, yes, the stuff you've seen in shampoo ads. But here, it's food, ground with almonds and honey until it becomes amlou, a thick, nutty spread with the texture of velvet and the ambition of dessert. They hand you a piece of cobs slathered with it. One bite, and you know this isn't going to help you sleep. This is going to make you write poetry at 3 a.m. about almonds and existential joy. You sit down beside a stall that sells nothing but preserved things: lemons, turnips, garlic, even watermelon rind, all soaking in brine and vinegar and oil, stacked in glass jars that shimmer under the lamplight like edible stained glass. Each one smells like a family recipe and a minor dare. The lemon pickle hits you hardest sour, salty, slightly fermented, with a hint of clove. It would ruin a cappuccino, but elevate a lamb tagine to a religious experience. A vendor nearby swats away a cat with a broom, muttering that the cheese thief has returned. The cat doesn't even flinch. You assume this is a long-running feud with no clear winner. Somewhere in this sticky, spicy moment, you realize you're not just full, you're preserved, like the lemons, cured in salt, spice, and streetlight, a little sleepier, a little sweeter, and slightly more complex than you were an hour ago. You lean back, fingers glistening, lips tingling from chili and citrus, and for the first time all evening, you exhale like someone who has officially given up on moderation. Just when you think you've reached the zenith of street food wonder, you smell something so outrageous, it stops you mid-step, like a sugar-dusted pie just kissed a spit-roasted bird. It's warm, flaky, faintly cinnamony, and meaty. You follow the scent to a stall covered with brass trays stacked in pyramid-like perfection. The vendor, wearing a flour-dusted robe, and the grin of someone about to surprise your entire belief system, slices into a pie and reveals pigeon pie. To be exact, Bastilla, if you want to say it like a local. Don't flinch. Pigeons in medieval Morocco were bred for this, pampered like feathery little nobles before becoming the main event at street-side feasts. The meat inside is shredded, delicate, and cooked with saffron, cinnamon, and herbs until it practically sighs into the pastry. Layered over that, toasted almonds, hard-boiled egg, and powdered sugar. Yes, skr, and it works. Somehow, you take a bite. Your brain short circuits. It's dessert. It's dinner. It's neither. It's a pie with identity issues and a 1,000-year pedigree. The crust is like whisper-thin phyllo, but crisped in a way that your teeth applaud. The filling dances between savory and sweet, like it's testing you. You pass. Historians still argue whether pastilla originated in Andalusia or if it was born from a Moroccan fusion of Berber, Arab, and Moorish kitchens. Some say it was created for royalty and trickled down. Others argue street cooks invented it first, and aristocrats just copied them with fancier pigeons. Either way, it's now yours for 3 dirhams and a slightly dazed look. You glance around. Others are eating it too, in quiet reverence, as if chewing through centuries of culinary diplomacy. You lock eyes with a man dipping pieces of his pastilla into a mixture of honey and vinegar. You try it. It's weird, and then it's perfect, and then it's weird again. Next to the pie stall is a setup that looks less like a kitchen and more like an almond apocalypse. Trays upon trays of roasted nuts, almonds, walnuts, hazelnuts, all dusted with sugar or glazed in syrup, wrapped in parchment, or pressed into sticky bricks. You sample an almond bar spiced with fennel. It's both crunchy and cooling, like biting into a snack that also offers relationship advice. The vendor tosses you a few candied raisins, deep brown and slightly plump. One explodes in your mouth with a whiny burst that makes you momentarily believe in reincarnation. You ask what makes the raisins so dramatic. The vendor shrugs. They were dried on the roof. By accident. Of course they were. A woman selling saffron from a velvet-lined pouch gestures you over. She lifts the lid. It's like sunlight trapped in threads. You don't even touch it. You just inhale. It's floral, metallic, ancient. You're told a pinch of this went into the pie. You're told it costs more than your shoes. You nod slowly and back away, like you're at a museum exhibit titled, "Too Rich for You." As you keep walking, you spot trays of missamin folded into triangles, stuffed this time with almond paste and brushed with orange blossom syrup. A child offers you a sample with sticky fingers and no sales pitch. You bite. You instantly regret only taking one. But maybe the most comforting thing you eat tonight is the simplest. Dried figs stuffed with roasted sesame seeds. No sugar glaze. No saffron. No identity crisis. Just chewy, nutty, honest food. You let one melt in your mouth as you sit by a lantern, your feet tired and your belly conducting a slow waltz. Someone walks by offering a drink made from soaked dates and almond milk. It's thick, cold, slightly gritty, and tastes like dessert had a nap and came back more thoughtful. And suddenly, you're aware that every one of these foods, from the flaky pie to the raisins of destiny, tells a story about Moroccan trade. The almonds, from the Atlas foothills. The sugar, maybe imported via trans-Saharan routes. The cinnamon, traveled all the way from Ceylon or Sumatra, passing through the hands of smugglers, sailors, and merchants, before ending up on your pigeon pie. There's no such thing as simple food here. Every bite is a passport stamp. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat someone laid out earlier in the evening. You watch the crowd change. People now walk slower. Vendors lean back. Someone nearby is dozing upright, arms crossed, head bobbing to the rhythm of digestion. Your own body feels heavy in a good way, like you're made of sugar and almond now. Your fingers are still dusted in powdered sweetness. and your mind is foggy with cinnamon mist. This, you think, is how a city feeds itself into memory, one bite, one breath, one perfect raisin at a time. You don't mean to wander toward the darker edge of the souk, but somehow your feet take you there. The lanterns are fewer now, the crowd thins, and the smells shift less sweet, more primal. Grilled meat, smoke, charcoal blackened bones. Here, the food isn't plated or powdered with sugar. It's skewered, roasted, hacked apart, and sold by the gram. This is where you find the cuts no one else talks about. The parts of the animal that don't get their own cooking shows, but absolutely get eaten. A vendor with arms like rolling pins is tending a fire pit. He doesn't say a word, just jabs a skewer into a rack of meat and pulls it away, dripping with grease. Camel hump, he mutters, like it's a dare. Camel hump, you learn, is fatty, gelatinous, and rich in a way that defies comparison. You take a cautious bite, and it melts in your mouth not like butter, more like meat that gave up on being solid. There's something deeply satisfying about it, like chewing on a rare opinion. You nod respectfully. The vendor smiles. Good for strength, he says, tapping his biceps. Whether that's a joke or a sales pitch, you'll never know. Next stall over, udus, cow udder, sliced into strips and grilled to a chewy finish, tastes like milk that forgot it was liquid. The texture is somewhere between calamari and firm tofu, but with a barnyard swagger. Historians still argue whether these odd cuts were viewed as delicacies or just eaten out of necessity. In wealthier districts, they were often discarded. In places like this, they were reinvented, celebrated, even revered. No part of the animal went to waste an ethic born of scarcity. Turned into culinary innovation, you try liver next soaked in cumin, paprika, and lemon. It's served on a skewer made of olive wood, warm and mineral rich, like biting into the memory of a thunderstorm. A vendor sprinkles it with coarse salt and squeezes preserved lemon over the top. It sizzles, and your eyebrows lift involuntarily. Then there's brain. Yes, brain. Lamb brain. Boiled then pan-fried with garlic and turmerics. You hesitate, 'cause let's be honest, it looks like something from a wizard's pantry. But it's soft, custardy, shockingly mild, like eggs that got a college degree. You eat it with a chunk of bread and try not to think too hard about it, which, ironically, is kind of poetic. The fire crackles nearby, throwing shadows against the stone walls. A vendor starts singing under his breath a lullaby, maybe, or a prayer. You realize no one here is rushing. The meat takes time, and the stories even more. Someone passes you a small paper cone filled with deep-fried lamb fat trimmings. They're crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, and dusted with ground fennel. You shouldn't like them. You do. A child appears with a tray of boiled sheep tongue. You take a slice. It's rich, meaty, and slightly smoky. The vendor explains that it's simmered for hours in a broth of cloves, bay leaves, and onion skin. The broth is the secret, he says, and then winks. Also, don't ask what else was in it. You laugh. He doesn't. You're unsure if that was a joke. You rest for a moment beside a column that's been worn smooth by centuries of leaning humans. A cat curls around your foot, purring like it knows all your secrets and finds them predictable. A group of men nearby are playing a game with dice and bones. They gesture you over and offer you a seat. You shake your head, mouth too full of some new meat you forgot to identify. It might have been heart, or kidney, or something they called surprise cut. Best not to dwell. Nearby, someone grills testicles. You look, you nod politely, you move on. One man is selling a stew out of a ceramic pot the size of a toddler. It simmers quietly, steam rising in slow curls. You ask what's in it. He looks at you seriously and says, "Yes." You take a bowl. It's spicy, thick, heavy with chickpeas and chunks of mystery. You finish it without asking further questions. This corner of the market is where appetites meet courage, where you learn that being a picky eater isn't compatible with being a time traveler. Here, the food doesn't ask for permission, it simply shows up, smells amazing, and dares you not to love it. You find yourself chewing thoughtfully, staring into the flames, wondering what tomorrow's stomach might think of tonight's decisions. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you are a medieval Moroccan carnivore, and no organ meat shall intimidate you. The fire pops. You close your eyes. You exhale the scent of cumin, smoke, and slightly singed goat hair, and you smile. You retreat from the smoky corners of awful paradise, your stomach pleasantly perplexed, your breath now consisting of 40% cumin. The market seems to change as you step into another alley, this one bright with color, quiet with focus, and loud with scent. Here, the ingredients are smaller, but no less important. This is the spice quarter. You pause near a vendor surrounded by mounds of powdered color, brilliant oranges, deep reds, sulfuric yellows. The jars are labeled in Arabic, French, and a kind of body language that tells you exactly how spicy not to be. You lean in. The air smells like heat and history. The man behind the table lifts a pinch of bright yellow powder between his fingers. Saffron, you guess. He laughs. No, he says. Turmeric. He points toward another jar. This one paler, rougher. That's the good one, he says. Most people mix the real with the fake. Make more money. Historians still argue whether the saffron trade in medieval Morocco was controlled by official guilds or black market spice routes. One thing's for sure, spices were currency, not metaphorically. They could literally be used to settle debts, win favors, even arrange marriages. A man once proposed with a sack of nutmeg. It didn't work out, but still respect. You lean in again. A new scent rises. Coriander, earthy, warm, faintly citrus. Another mound. Fiery red paprika smoked until it tastes like an echo of fire. Next to it, a darker blend, Brazilianut. The top of the shelf spice mix. The name means head of the shop, and every vendor has their own version. Yours contains at least 14 ingredients, though he won't tell you which. The vendor sprinkles some onto a slice of preserved lemon and hands it over. You bite down, and it's like tasting a riddle. Sweet, sour, sharp, complex. It doesn't make sense until it does. Further down, a woman is carefully selecting dried rose petals. You ask what she's using them for. Perfume, she says, then adds, also, cookies. A pause. Also, for headaches. That tracks. Behind her, bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters. Oregano, thyme, bay leaf, and wild mint so strong it practically bites you. Each has its own backstory. This one cures stomach aches. That one repels insects. This one might attract good dreams. The line between spice and medicine is blurry here. Intent matters as much as recipe. One spice vendor grins and waves you over like you're a long-lost cousin. He offers a bowl of harira soup, thick, red, and steaming. It's a tomato-lentil blend with chickpeas, broken vermicelli, and just enough cinnamon to make you second-guess your assumptions. You sip. It's bold but grounding, the kind of food that feels like a speech about resilience. On the wall behind him is a wooden tablet covered in what looks like dust. He explains it's crushed charcoal mixed with dried lavender and used to freshen breath. You try a pinch. It's like eating smoke that got lost in a flower shop. He pulls out another spice, dark brown and wrinkled. Grains of paradise, used like black pepper, but with a ginger-like bite. Traders once carried it across deserts to sell in Venice. Now you're chewing it like a medieval tic tac. A child runs past, a trail of star anise falling from her apron. You scoop one up, hold it to your nose, and the scent is instantly familiar licorice, warm and nostalgic, like your grandmother's kitchen if your grandmother had lived in a souk and bartered with cinnamon. Another vendor proudly shows you his true saffron 3 strands, redder than rubies, stored in a glass vial wrapped in velvet. He lets you smell it. You almost don't out of reverence, but you do. It's sweet, metallic, like honey that's seen some things. And then, the moment you've been warned about, a loud argument breaks out between 2 spice vendors, one accusing the other of selling yellow clay as turmeric. The other insists it's a local blend. A few words fly. A sandal is thrown. The crowd chuckles but stays uninvolved. This, apparently, is just a Tuesday. You smile because you understand something now. These aren't just ingredients. They're reputations, traditions, identities. Spice fraud isn't just rude, it's existential. The air is thick with competing aromas. A spice fog. You feel like you've entered a dream in powdered form. Someone passes you a small glass of milk with cinnamon and a pinch of nutmeg. You sip. It cools your throat, calms your nerves, and makes your teeth feel like they've been tucked in. You sit again, this time on a worn mat beneath bundles of hanging herbs. You reach into your pocket and find a few strands of saffron you didn't buy, but were slipped to you by a vendor as a gift. He'd whispered, "You'll understand later. Maybe you will, maybe you won't." But it's already working. You emerge from the spice district like a newly anointed priest of aroma, blinking against the sudden brightness of fire pits and crowded stalls once again. But now something smells heartier, steamy, earthy, familiar in an unfamiliar way. You follow your nose like a medieval bloodhound and find it. A group of strangers sitting cross-legged on woven mats around a giant shared dish of couscous. Couscous, tiny steamed semolina pearls fluffed by hand 3 times over by someone with more patience than you've shown in your entire adult life. The communal dish is a dome of grain topped with vegetables arranged in decorative symmetry carrots like sun rays, chickpeas like jewels, and long, tender zucchini like sleepy green boats. At the center, slow-cooked lamb falling into itself. You sit down. Someone tears off a piece of cobs and hands it to you. No words, just a nod. There are no forks. No problem. You pinch the couscous with 3 fingers, scoop a chunk of carrot, and navigate the physics of saucy lamb with more hope than skill. The result is immediate. Warmth, salt, cinnamon, a whisper of ginger, and the taste of food made for togetherness. Couscous is often seen as a dish for Friday afternoons, part of a religious rhythm. But in medieval Morocco, especially in cities like Fez and Tlemcen, it was street food too, prepared in huge batches by women at home, then sold from covered pots or open platters to anyone with a coin and a craving. Historians still argue whether couscous originated with the Berbers or was an Andalusian import refined over centuries. Some even claim the Romans had a version. One 13th century traveler described it as grains of patience soaked in broth and kindness, which frankly sounds like a marketing slogan you'd buy on a mug. You listen to the group around you. Some are travelers, some are merchants. One old man says he's a retired tanner. He dips bread into the sauce and tells a joke about a camel and a magistrate. It makes no sense, but you laugh because he laughs, and his joy is sticky. A small boy rushes by with a tray of extra broth in tiny bowls. You're offered one. You sip it like it's sacred, and maybe it is. It tastes of marrow, onion, turmeric, maybe dried rose petals. You're not sure. It tastes like stories told by people who forgot to write things down. Someone tosses a handful of raisins onto the couscous. It's unexpected, but somehow perfect, sweet and savory, soft and firm. This dish isn't one note, it's a chorus, and every bite shifts depending on where you reach. A roasted turnip here, a charred bit of lamb fat there, all held together by those tiny, perfect grains. You try to mimic the technique of the woman beside you. She rolls the couscous with her fingers, forms a tight ball, then flicks it into her mouth in one motion. You try. You fail. Your couscous ball collapses midair, and you're left wiping turmeric from your shirt with quiet shame. She grins and hands you a fig's redemption. A vendor nearby sells a couscous variant with sweet toppings cooked with milk, cinnamon, and crushed almonds. Dessert couscous. You take a bite, and it's like breakfast got dressed up for a festival. The sounds around you shift into a lull. A musician strums a lute gently under an awning. Two old men debate whether to add more broth. A breeze kicks up and stirs the herbs drying above a stall. You breathe in fennel, garlic, and satisfaction. You notice the couscous is disappearing, not from hunger alone, but because people are packing it up in banana leaves and folded cloth, taking it home. Street food, yes, but also street comfort, street ritual. You lean back and rest your hands on your knees. A woman offers you a white rosewater soaked cloth, delicately perfumed. You press it to your face. Your skin says thank you, and then, like the final line of a poem, someone appears with mint tea. Of course, full circle. You sip and think. This meal didn't just fill you, it softened something inside. Your pace, your expectations, your assumptions about what counts as simple. You're full now, but not just with food, with impressions, grain-sized details that will stick to your memory like couscous to your sleeve. A meal without pretense, a market where no one eats alone unless they choose to, a dish that feeds 10 and asks for nothing but your hands. The couscous was always the heart. Everything else, it was the pulse. The next alley draws you in with a scent both humble and ancient beans, stewed, smashed, curbed, and handed out in warm clay bowls like edible conversation starters. You've entered the fava zone. A man with a beard so thick it deserves its own postal code ladles a thick greenish mash into a bowl, sprinkles cumin, olive oil, and coarse salt over the top, then hands it to you with a wooden spoon. No preamble, just vibes. You take a bite. It's earthy, creamy, and oddly addictive, like mashed potatoes that read philosophy. The cumin hits, first sharp and warm, followed by garlic, lemon, and something smokier, maybe paprika. You wipe your lips with your sleeve and immediately accept a second helping. This is Bassara, Morocco's famous fava bean soup. But don't let the name soup fool you. This is closer to a paste, the kind that coats your ribs and convinces you that winter isn't such a threat after all. Historians still argue whether the recipe predates the Arab arrival or evolved through contact with Roman and Andalusian food cultures. What they agree on, it stuck around because it was cheap, filling, and embarrassingly delicious. Street food at its most proletarian. You sit on an overturned crate next to a man reading aloud from a scroll, his mouth moving rhythmically between bites. He's eating the same thing you are, with an intensity that suggests it's both lunch and a long-term relationship. Between spoonfuls, he mutters a poem about beans and betrayal. You're not sure it rhymes, but you clap anyway. Behind him, another vendor crushes garlic and salt in a stone mortar the size of your head. She adds a generous glug of olive oil, then slices pickled turnips and sets them atop the fava stew like pink punctuation marks. You try that version next. It's sharp, tangy, electric, a wake-up call you didn't know you needed. Then something odd catches your eye. A Roman coin embedded in the wall, just sitting there, half visible in the crumbling plaster, like a history Easter egg. You lean closer and realize this isn't just any back alley. It's resting on the bones of something older. A ruin, maybe. A wall that was once a forum, a bathhouse, a bakery, or all three. You remember reading that parts of Morocco, especially cities like Volubilis and Tingis, were full Roman territories for centuries. When the empire fell, the bones stayed, layered beneath the rising souks, the fava beans. Though they survived it all. Romans ate them, Berbers adapted them, Arabs spiced them, and now you're spooning them into your face while sitting on 2,000 years of recycled stone. It's the kind of thought that makes you sit straighter until the beans pull you back into a slump of contentment. A child offers you a pickle from a ceramic jar. You accept. It's sour, hot, and oddly refreshing. The child nods like a tiny spice sommelier and disappears back into the crowd. Then, a surprise. A vendor offers you basara cold, chilled overnight, then stirred with harissa and lemon. You brace yourself, but it works. Somehow, it feels even older, like a recipe carved into stone. Refreshing, sharp, and bizarrely elegant. A man nearby dips barley bread into the bowl with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious texts. He catches your eye and says, "Good beans make for quiet wars." You don't ask for clarification. You just nod, because he's absolutely right. The breeze shifts. The scent of the beans mixes with crushed thyme, drying on a nearby mat. A woman is folding napkins made of muslin, each embroidered with pomegranate motifs. She's humming something slow and low, a melody that sounds older than her bones. As you finish your second bowl, or is it your fourth, a vendor offers you a drink, a spiced buttermilk laced with mint. It cools the burns of the harissa and settles the heaviness of the legumes. You feel like your stomach just curled up with a blanket, and you start to notice something else. Everyone here seems well-fed, but also somehow lighter, like they've eaten not just for energy, but for peace. This isn't fast food, it's quiet food. Food that calms the weather inside your head. You sit back, spoon dangling in your hand, belly humming with gratitude and garlic. A stray cat curls near your feet, not begging, just keeping you company, as if to say, yeah, this spot, good beans. And it is. You rise slowly, fava-laden and slightly pickled, and drift deeper into the market, where the familiar comfort of simmering stews returns only this time. It's seafood, which is strange, considering you're hundreds of kilometers from the ocean. You follow the scent salty, sharp, and a little funky until you arrive at a stall draped with woven baskets and anchored by a bubbling pot the size of a cauldron. The vendor, a leathery-faced man with eyes like polished stone, ladles out something silvery and thick into a wide ceramic bowl. You catch the glint of a fishtail. Mullet, he says, salted, 2 days old, still good. You're skeptical. Of course you are. The sea is far, the camel is slow, and refrigeration is still centuries away. And yet, here it is: stewed fish, soft tomatoes, green olives, and preserved lemon slices bobbing like golden punctuation. You take a cautious bite. It's incredible. The mullet is tender, flaking apart with a spoon, seasoned with cumin, coriander, and a touch of dried red chili. The stew is warm, oily, and briny in the best way, like licking the memory of the sea. How, you ask, gesturing vaguely toward the distant Atlantic. The man shrugs. Salt, he says. Camels, patience. Historians still argue how medieval inland Moroccan cities maintained such a thriving fish trade. Some say caravans delivered preserved seafood, salted in Essaouira or Tangier. Others claim fish were traded dried and then rehydrated in stews like edible time travelers. Either way, it worked. Somehow, against logic and geography, these cities dined on the ocean. Next to the stew pot sits a tray of sardines, stuffed with herbs, rolled tight, and grilled over an open flame. You try one. It's crispy on the outside, melting on the inside, and absolutely defiant about not being fresh from a dog. You overhear a conversation between two spice vendors about the secret fish spice. One claims it's caraway and dried orange peel. The other swears by crushed bay leaf and burnt lemon skin. They're both wrong, probably, but you appreciate their passion. Another man dips his bread into a paste made from anchovies, garlic, and oil. It looks like punishment. It tastes like enlightenment. Behind him, a child carries a platter of couscous with whole salted sardines arranged in a spiral. You get a glimpse before it vanishes into a side alley like a fish-based mirage. Then comes something surprising. A small skewer of grilled eel. You raise an eyebrow. The vendor nods solemnly. River, not sea, he clarifies. It's brushed with honey and vinegar, a blend that tastes both medieval and oddly modern, like someone deep-fried philosophy. You pause, leaning on a pillar that may or may not have once belonged to a Roman bathhouse. It's cracked, moss-covered, and warm to the touch. The smells here are different from the meat-heavy parts of the market. There's less smoke, more oil, more citrus. The air feels lighter, scented with thyme and sun-dried coriander. A young woman offers you a triangle of bread stuffed with chopped shrimp and spiced lentils. You ask if it's local. She shrugs. My mother made it. She says, good enough. Nearby, a man pours a thick fish soup into small wooden bowls. It's bright red, bubbling, and studded with chickpeas. It smells like paprika and mystery. You take a sip, and it floods your tongue with warmth and memory. It's the kind of soup that feels like you've eaten it before, maybe in a dream. You notice a pile of dried shrimp in a basket, sun-browned and wrinkled like raisins of the sea. They're ground into powder and sprinkled over dishes like fishy MSG. You try a pinch, it explodes with umami, then vanishes like a magician's assistant. The deeper you go, the more you realize that seafood in medieval Morocco wasn't a novelty. It was a testament, a sign that people could bend distance, preserve flavor, and eat like kings, even in the shadow of mountains. A man nearby is carving salted tuna with a blade shaped like a half moon. He serves it with olives and a wedge of lemon. You eat it slowly, thoughtfully, like it's a sermon. As you chew, you hear someone reciting poetry about the sea. You can't catch every word, but you catch the meaning. The sea is always far, but never gone. You finish your stew, your eel, your sardine spiral, and thank the ocean for traveling so far inland. Then you thank the camel, and you smile. You drift from the ocean's echo and into firelight again, glowing coals, spitting fat, and the smell of meat hitting metal with a hiss like punctuation. You're in kebab territory now. Not skewers as you know them uniform, regulated, and shaped by modern boredom, but something far more poetic. Literally, the first thing you hear isn't the sound of sizzling, it's verse. A man with a charcoal grill is reciting lines of Andalusian poetry while flipping meatballs with a twig. His rhythm is flawless, his meter tight. You're not sure whether you're supposed to applaud or order. You do both, just to be safe. He hands you a skewer, 3 meatballs, glistening, flecked with herbs, and lightly charred at the edges. You take a bite. They're soft, almost too soft, but bursting with cinnamon, cumin, and garlic. The meat is lamb, maybe beef, Maybe both. There's a sharp, lemony tang that sneaks in just as you're mid-chew. Kefta, the humble meatball, made holy through spice and fire. You sit on a low stool made from woven palm fronds. A boy fans the coals with a piece of cardboard, looking only mildly interested in not setting himself on fire. A woman beside him brushes olive oil over a fresh skewer using a rosemary sprig. This isn't a restaurant. It's a poem with a heat source. Historians still argue whether grilling meat on open flames was a commoner's craft or something appropriated by nobility during festivals. What they agree on, the process itself was ceremonial, slow grilling over coals, no rushing, like a conversation, like a song. You try another skewer, this one's spicier, with visible flecks of chili and crushed pistachios worked into the meat. It's richer, punchier. You take a bite and suddenly want to write a letter to someone you haven't spoken to in years. The poet chef continues. I grilled this kefta like I grilled my doubts, slowly, over coals, until they were delicious. Everyone around him groans at the pun. You laugh out loud. He bows slightly and flips another skewer. There's bread here too, round, thick, slightly charred from being toasted on the same grill. It's used like a utensil, folded to cradle the meat, soaking up every drop of oil and juice. Next to you, a girl dips a chunk of bread into a bowl of thick yogurt mixed with grated cucumber and mint. She adds a grilled meatball and wraps it up like a tiny gift. You copy her. It works. Of course it does. The vendor next door sells pickled carrots, olives, and roasted garlic cloves by the handful. They're offered as palate cleansers, or maybe just taste accelerants. You're not sure? You take one of each, and your tongue throws a small party. And then comes the slow roast. At the far end of the alley, a man is tending to a lamb shank, skewered through with a sword and buried half into glowing embers. He turns it once every few minutes, humming softly. A child counts the turns aloud like it's a game. You're handed a slice after what feels like hours. It's been 20 minutes. It's smoky, falling apart tender, infused with rosemary, saffron, and thyme. You eat it with your fingers. The juice runs down your wrist. You don't care. Someone lights a lantern nearby. It flickers against the stone walls, illuminating dried herbs hanging like wind chimes. The air smells like meat, mint, and poetry that didn't make it to paper. A man offers you a drink, something sour and cloudy, served in a small clay cup. You sip. It's lemon and salted almond milk, tart and thick. It cuts through the richness in your mouth like a reset button. You sit back again, belly warm, mind slower. The poet is now reciting something about grilled onions and forbidden love. It sounds dramatic. You love it. And here's the thing, grilling isn't just cooking here. It's dialogue. Every turn of the skewer is a question. Every brush of oil, a reply. Fire is the moderator. And your mouth, well, it's the happily overwhelmed participant. You close your eyes for a moment and let the smoke settle around you. Somewhere, someone drops a pan. A baby cries. A cat yowls like it's had a vision. But all you hear is the crackle of fire and the rhythm of meatball poetry echoing into the night. You're about to follow the kebab smoke down another alley when a new sound catches your ear. Not the clang of pots or poetry this time, but hushed conversation behind a woven reed curtain. You move toward it, cautiously curious, and peer into a semi-enclosed courtyard where something unusual is happening. The women, cooking, publicly, but also not really. They sit on low stools, heads covered, robes tucked, surrounded by bubbling clay pots and baskets of herbs. It looks like a miniature kitchen brigade, except there's no storefront, no menu, no sign, just quiet precision and the unmistakable smell of something divine being prepared with hands that do not hurry. You stand outside the threshold, unsure if you're intruding. One of the women glances up and gives a quick, almost conspiratorial nod. You're allowed in. You take a seat at a respectful distance as a flatbread is being crisped on a domed griddle tagine dome. Someone whispers, "It's not the tagine you're thinking of yet. This is more rustic, used to toast and bake and press all at once." One of the younger women is mashing fava beans in a wide ceramic bowl, adding cumin and lemon with practiced flicks of her wrist. Another sprinkles rose petals onto a dessert that's part pastry, part floral daydream. You watch, hypnotized. They don't speak much, but everything say is this is not amateur hour. And then comes the dish that stops time. Arfisa, strips of chewy flatbread layered with chicken, lentils, and a broth perfumed with fenugreek and ras el hanout. You're handed a small bowl. The steam curls like a veil. The first bite is intense savory, warm, tangy, and thick with flavor that feels maternal. Historians still argue whether dishes like arafissa were traditionally served only in private homes or allowed limited street presence when women were the cooks. This in-between space half market, half kitchen is part of that gray zone. It wasn't quite public commerce, but everyone knew where to find it. You chew slowly, grateful. The bread has soaked up the broth, but still has bite. The chicken is melting apart, spiced but not overpowering. You taste the layering of generations, what someone's great-grandmother added, and what someone's cousin dared to change. You're offered tea, this time from a pot that looks hand-painted and slightly lopsided. It tastes stronger than the street version, less sweet, more mint, more intention. You drink it slowly. It doesn't ask for compliments. Behind you, two women begin rolling dough into thin sheets. They aren't just making dinner, they're making presents. In a world where men dominate the market stalls and grills, this quiet culinary circle is both protest and poetry. It isn't hidden, but it's not announced either. One of them is braiding dough into a spiral and stuffing it with spiced onions and raisins. You ask what it's called. She shrugs. It doesn't have a name. She says, "It's just what we do when we miss someone." You take a bite later. It tastes like memory. Another woman lifts the lid off a pot and unleashes the perfume of chickpeas and turmeric with curls of smoke that carry something almost perfumed. You inhale and try to name it. Rose, saffron, grief. It's impossible to tell. A teenage girl enters, balancing a tray of preserved lemons, salt, and candied dates. She sets them down with the grace of royalty, then joins the circle, quietly peeling almonds. Everything here happens in gestures, a nod, a smile, a flick of the hand. Nothing is rushed, and yet everything moves. There's no sense of performance, just the steady, private rhythm of women feeding their world from a side alley. No one maps. You're given another small plate, something sweet this time, a semolina cake soaked in orange blossom syrup and studded with slivered almonds. It melts the second it hits your tongue. The woman who made it doesn't even look up. She already knows you'll ask for more. The sun has dropped low now. The light is soft, golden, respectful. Shadows grow long on the mosaic tiles at your feet. And for the first time, you realize there's a whole culinary world here you almost missed. A world that simmers behind curtains, under roofs, around corners. A world that feeds without spectacle. A world that, despite everything, makes itself felt in every flavor. You leave the courtyard full, humbled, and slightly better behaved. You don't look back. It doesn't feel right. Some spaces are gifts. You take the warmth with you. You step quietly from the courtyard of whispered recipes and into the soft glow of the market's evening hush. The rhythm is slower now, less shouting, more chatting, more chewing. You drift toward a stand lit by candles, arranged in a perfect circle, like a shrine. And in the center of that sugary halo, the sweets, but not just desserts for flavor. These are sweets that mean something. The first tray you see is filled with tiny, tear-shaped pastries glazed with honey and dusted in powdered sugar. You ask their name, Shibakia. The vendor says, for Ramadan, but good any night. Your heart is tired. You bite into one. The texture is complicated, crispy on the outside, but somehow syrupy inside, with a mix of sesame, cinnamon, and orange blossom water. It's like the pastries was dunked in nostalgia, then deep fried in someone's best intentions. A woman nearby arranges another platter, this one shaped like fish. You ask if it's marzipan. No, she says, it's almonds and prayers. Turns out these sweets are often shaped for symbolic purposes. Eyes to ward off jealousy, birds to bring messages, crescents for blessings. They aren't just food, they're edible spells. One tiny tart looks like a flower in bloom. It's called griba, a crumbly shortbread with almonds, anise, and a hint of lemon. The name means strange one, which, you're told, refers to how the pastry cracks at the top, imperfect by design. You try one. It falls apart before your teeth do anything. It tastes like a sigh or a secret. Historians still debate whether Morocco's pastry traditions were shaped more by Andalusian influence or Berber invention. Some believe certain sugar crafts came through the Ottoman Empire. Others claim the recipes are far older, based on rituals that had little to do with dinner and everything to do with symbolism, superstition, and seasonal shifts. A vendor invites you to try selloa toasted flour, almond, and sesame mixture, usually served during childbirth or fasting. It looks like sandy cake. You scoop a handful and press it into a bite. It's dense, nutty, and tastes like the desert got philosophical. Beside it, Makroud, a date-filled semolina treat, soaked in honey. You try not to drool. You fail. It's chewy, rich, and somehow makes your molars feel appreciated. Children dart between legs, holding trays of Kab el Ghazal, gazelle horns, crescent-shaped almond cookies. They look like moons, taste like warm memory. You take one and think, this market doesn't just want you full, it wants you remembered. A man is selling a drink made of almond milk, cinnamon, and rose. It's cloudy, poured from a bottle with no label. You sip it and immediately feel like someone read your diary and decided to respond with flavor. Another stall catches your eye. Flat pastries arranged in a spiral, filled with crushed dates and black sesame seeds. This one, the vendor says, you eat it before you say something brave. So you eat it, just in case. Next to you, a woman is lighting a candle and placing it into a shallow bowl of harira, the classic tomato lentil soup, but this one is served after the sweets. You raise an eyebrow. She smiles to ground the sugar. Otherwise, the dreams are too fast. You're not entirely sure what she means, but you nod like you do. And as you sip the warm, spiced broth, it makes more sense than it should. A young couple walks by, giggling with powdered sugar on their noses, sharing bites of mahancha, a coiled almond pastry that looks like a golden snake. They break off a piece and offer it to you like it's currency. You accept. It's flaky, sweet, fragrant. You consider proposing. The market is quieter now. The candles flicker like lazy fireflies. Every few steps, someone hands you something tiny, sweet, and significant. A fig stuffed with sesame, a sliver of preserved quince, a sugar cube soaked in rosewater. None of it overwhelming, all of it meaningful. And then, finally, a vendor offers you the last sweet of the night. It's a simple ball of dates and nuts rolled in coconut flakes. This one, he says, is for dreams. Eat it before you go. You do. It's soft, simple, sincere, and as it dissolves on your tongue, so does the noise of the market. What's left is the sweetness and the silence. You step away from the last of the sweets, heart full and sugar soaked, thinking you've reached the end. But the market has one more gift for you, a final street, quieter than the others, where the fire has gone out, but the coals still glow, and people are sitting in small circles, not eating now, but talking. You join them not because you're hungry, but because something in the air still asks to be witnessed. And it's here, over a simple round of sesame bread and a sip of water, that you begin to see the bigger picture. The bread is different here, simpler, no filling, no honey, no complicated shapes, just a soft, lightly salted round, baked until the edges crisp and the center steams when torn. You break off a piece, chew slowly, and realize this bread isn't trying to impress. It's trying to remind of empire, of connection, of trade routes that spanned deserts and dynasties, from West Africa to the Levant, from Iberia to India. Every bite you've had tonight, whether eel, fig, or fermented cheese, has whispered stories of movement, of ambition, of exchange, because medieval Morocco wasn't just eating, it was networking. Historians often point to the grandeur of the dynasties, the Almoravids, the Almohads, the Marinids, but the streets told a quieter truth. Empire lived in the hands of bakers, in the fire pits of meatball poets, in the pouches of spice vendors, and the songs of fish merchants in cities far from the coast. Someone beside you breaks their bread and dips it into olive oil, then presses it into crushed anise seed. Another stirs a bowl of barley porridge with dried apricots and offers you a taste. It's mild, warm, soothing, the kind of food meant not to dazzle, but to endure nearby. Someone tells a story about an African merchant who arrived in Fez with nothing but cola nuts and a map drawn in charcoal. He sold ginger candies on a cloth in the square and, 10 years later, owned 3 granaries and a share in a caravan. True or not, no one seems to care. It's the kind of story that sticks because it could be true. And you realize something. All this food, these pies and porridges, these snails and skewers are more than just meals. They're footprints, traces of trade, pilgrimage, exile, return. Every flavor you've tasted has traveled farther than you have. Some have outlived the people who first imagined them. A man sets down a clay vessel filled with preserved lemon and olives, both shriveled and shining in oil. He speaks softly about how his grandmother made the same recipe for 40 years, never measuring a thing. It changes every season, he says, but it's always ours. You nod. The scent is sharp, bright, like the past trying to stay fresh. The empire may have been built on gold, knowledge, and faith, but it was held together by flavor, by trust, by the unspoken language of shared meals. A woman stands to leave. She wraps leftover bread in a cloth and tucks it under her arm. Not waste, never waste. Another man wipes out a bowl with the last scrap of cobs and folds it clean. These streets may sleep, but nothing here forgets. You feel it in your belly and your bones, and just before the lamps dim, someone presses one last item into your hand, a piece of hard candy wrapped in dried fig leaf. You ask what's in it. The answer, trade. You smile. Of course. You pop it into your mouth. It's spiced, citruse, impossibly complex, not made to be chewed, meant to dissolve. And so it does. You walk now in silence. The market behind you hums with the memory of what it gave, warm bread still in your hand, spices still clinging to your skin. The night is softer here, past the final stall, past the last fire pit. where the lanterns give way to moonlight and the stones beneath your feet cool with the hour. You walk slower. Each breath deepens. The smells fade no longer, garlic or cumin or mint, but earth, stone, and dusk. You feel your steps matching the rhythm of your breath, and your breath matching the stillness of everything else. There's no more to eat, no more to say, but you carry it all: snail broth and saffron, sweet almond pastries, and conversations half heard but fully felt. Even the voices of the vendors stay with you now, like embers, faint, glowing, steady. A gentle breeze moves through your clothing. It's the kind that doesn't chill, it soothes, the kind that says, "You've wandered enough for tonight." You pass a cat sleeping in a doorway. A lamp still glows behind an old curtain. Somewhere, tea still simmers, but not for you. Not now. Now it's time to rest. Time to fold the stories of the market into dreams. Time to let the scents and the textures and the poems fade into the quiet of sleep. You curl beneath your blanket, real or imagined, and exhale once, slowly, like the steam from a bowl of broth cooling in the dark, and everything becomes still.